He was 21 years old when he chose to stay in hell, so others could leave when he jumped off a rescue helicopter that could have carried him to safety and ran back into enemy fire because 9 more wounded soldiers were still bleeding out in a jungle that was eating them alive. And those 9 men, those strangers who would spend the rest of their lives trying to explain what it means to be saved by someone who valued their survival more than his own. They watched him come back for them, watched him choose them over escape, watched him die defending bodies that weren't his responsibility, except that he'd decided every life was his responsibility. That's what the uniform meant to him. That's what service meant to a kid from Ohio, who could have been a door gunner, could have stayed in the air where it was safer, but instead became a para-rescue man because saving lives felt more important than taking them. And on April 11, 1966, that choice cost him everything and saved over 60 men who would carry his name like a prayer for the next 34 years, until the Air Force finally admitted that what he did deserved more than a footnote, deserved the Medal of Honor, deserved to have his sacrifice spoken out loud instead of buried in the bureaucracy that protects institutions better than it protects the memories of heroes who make those institutions look bad for taking so long to say thank you. You know what it's like to want your life to matter, to lie awake, wondering if you'd be brave when it counted, if you'd stand when everyone else ran, if you'd choose the right thing, when the cost was everything you'd ever be. And you tell yourself you would, you convince yourself that you're the kind of person who wouldn't abandon people in need, but deep down there's this fear, this suspicion that maybe you're not. Maybe when the moment came you'd choose yourself, choose survival, choose safety over sacrifice. And that uncertainty eats at you because you want to believe you're capable of heroism, but you've never been tested, never had to prove whether your values survive when they cost you something you can't afford to give. You admire people who do the impossible but wonder if you're built from the same material, if you have whatever it is that makes someone run toward danger instead of away from it. That makes someone stay when leaving is not only permitted but required. When everyone would understand if you saved yourself, but you decide that understanding isn't enough. That some things matter more than your own continuation. And you do not know if you have that in you because the world has mostly required you to survive, not to sacrifice. You watch movies about heroes and wonder which version you'd be, the one who makes the hard choice, or the one who lives with the guilt of not making it, the one who dies doing the right thing, or the one who survives doing the understandable thing. And the question haunts you because you want to believe you'd be the hero. But you've got people depending on you. You've got a future you're supposed to live. You've got reasons to survive that feel valid, that feel important. That feel like they should matter more than an abstract principle about duty or honor, or the value of strangers' lives compared to your own. You've never had to choose between your life and someone else's, never had to calculate whether their survival is worth your death, never had to make peace with the fact that doing the right thing means you don't get to see tomorrow, don't get to go home, don't get to have the life you were supposed to live, and you don't know if you could do it, do not know if when the helicopter is there and escape is possible and living is right there within reach, you could step off that salvation and walk back into hell because people you don't even know need you more than you need your own future. Here's what William Pitzenbarger did that the movie can show you, but can't make you feel in your bones. He'd already made 9 trips down that rescue hoist had already saved. 9 wounded soldiers had already done more than his job required, more than anyone expected, more than enough to satisfy duty or honor or any military code you could cite. And when the helicopter was taking enemy fire, when staying meant dying, when leaving was not only justified but ordered, he chose to send up a wounded man instead of himself, chose to stay on the ground where bullets were tearing through everything. Chose to refuse extraction because there were still men bleeding, still men who needed a medic, still men who wouldn't make it without someone willing to organize the chaos, to provide cover fire, to treat wounds while being shot at, to believe that their lives mattered enough to die protecting. Even though dying meant his parents would bury their only son, his fiancée would never become his wife, his future would become a memorial instead of a life. And he decided in that moment that all of that, all of his tomorrow was worth trading for their today, was worth sacrificing so that men with wives and children and families waiting could go home to them even if it meant he never would. And here's the brutal truth about real heroism that Hollywood softens because audiences can't handle how devastating actual sacrifice is. He fought for over an hour after refusing extraction, treated wounds while dodging bullets, directed defensive positions while bleeding from his own injuries, saved at least 9 more men after choosing to stay, and when he finally fell, when enemy fire finally hit him, in a way he couldn't survive, the men he'd been protecting watched him die trying to save them. Watched this 21-year-old kid from Piqua, Ohio bleed out in a jungle on the other side of the world because he believed their lives were worth his death. And they carried that knowledge for decades, carried the weight of being alive because someone else decided they mattered more than his own survival, carried the guilt and the gratitude and the impossible debt of owing your existence to someone who can never collect, who gave everything and asked nothing, and got forgotten by a military bureaucracy that took 34 years to decide that, yeah, maybe jumping off a helicopter to die saving strangers deserves the Medal of Honor. Maybe the highest form of courage deserves the highest military recognition, even if acknowledging it means admitting we forgot him, means admitting that the men who survived because of him had to fight almost as hard to get him recognized as he fought to keep them alive. You need to understand something about the cost of your comfort, about the invisible price that was paid for the freedom you take for granted. About the kids who were your age or younger, who went to places that would give you nightmares and chose to stay in those nightmares so that strangers could escape. Chose to die so that people they'd never met could live. Chose to believe that service meant something more than survival. That duty was about others, not yourself. That the uniform you wore was a promise to protect even when protection required you to stop existing. William Pitsenbarger didn't have to be a pararescueman. Didn't have to volunteer for the most dangerous job in a war full of dangerous jobs. Didn't have to go down that hoist even once, let alone 10 times. Didn't have to refuse extraction when staying meant dying. But he did all of it because somewhere in his 21 years of life, he decided that what he could do for others mattered more than what he could become for himself. That saving lives was worth more than living one. That being the kind of man who stays was more important than being the kind of man who survives. And that choice, that split-second decision to prioritize strangers over self, that's the thing that separates heroes from survivors. That's the thing that makes some people legends while the rest of us just live. And it's not fair to expect everyone to be capable of that level of sacrifice, but it's necessary to remember that someone did that. Your ability to sit here safely wondering if you'd be brave is built on the bones of people who proved they were. The men he saved spent decades fighting to get him the Medal of Honor, writing letters, collecting testimony, pushing through military bureaucracy that couldn't admit it had overlooked the most obvious example of valor above and beyond the call of duty. And they did this not because they needed the medal, not because it would bring him back, not because it changed anything about what happened in that jungle in 1966, but because they needed the world to know his name, needed their children to know why they had fathers, needed the record to reflect that William H. Pitsenbarger existed and mattered, and saved them when he could have saved himself. And in 2000, 34 years after his death, the Air Force finally awarded him the Medal of Honor, finally admitted that what he did deserved the highest recognition. Finally gave official acknowledgement to what the survivors had known since the moment they watched him choose to stay. That this was heroism in its purest form, sacrifice without calculation, duty without reservation, love for strangers that exceeded love for self. Start understanding that the life you're living, the safety you're experiencing, the freedom you're enjoying, it was purchased by people who decided you were worth dying for even though they never met you. Even though you couldn't thank them, even though their sacrifice would be forgotten or minimized or buried in bureaucracy that takes decades to correct itself. Start recognizing that heroism isn't about being fearless, it's about being terrified and choosing others anyway. It's about wanting desperately to live and deciding that someone else's life matters more. It's about having every reason to escape and refusing, because duty demands you stay, because the uniform means something, because you decided that the kind of person you want to be is worth more than the life you want to live. William Pitsenbarger had a whole future ahead of him, had plans and dreams and people who loved him, and he traded all of it for soldiers he barely knew, because in that moment, their survival mattered more than his own. And that's not a calculation most of us will ever have to make, but it's a debt all of us owe to people whose names we'll never know, whose sacrifices we'll never fully comprehend, whose choices made our choices possible. He threw himself into war to save a platoon, and he died doing it, and the military took 34 years to say his name properly. To give him the honor he'd earned in blood and sacrifice and the choice to value strangers over self. Proving once again that institutions are slow to recognize what individuals demonstrate instantly. That some people are worth remembering. That some sacrifices are worth honoring. That William H. Pitsenbarger was 21 years old when he became immortal. Not because of what he took from the world, but because of what he gave to it. Everything he had, everything he'd ever be, traded for lives that would remember him forever. Even if history took decades to catch up. And if you're looking for proof that one person can matter, that individual choice can echo across decades, that choosing others over self can change everything for people you'll never meet, remember him. Remember that a kid from Ohio proved that heroism isn't about living forever. It's about dying for something that matters more than your own continuation. And he did that without hesitation, without regret, without anything except the certainty that those soldiers deserved tomorrow more than he did. And that certainty, that devastating, beautiful certainty, that's what makes him a hero. That's what makes his story worth telling. That's what makes every comfortable moment you experience a gift paid for in blood by someone who decided you were worth it, even though you'll never be able to say thank you to his face.